Oh. Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to be here anyway, so.
I was just get like dinner at threes or a meal. I'll still get credit for
Email me so I don't forget, and I'll mark you as being here.
All right.
Thanks. Are you playing tonight, Brian? You're gonna play tonight? All right. Cyrus, how's it going? Pretty good, thanks. You playing any clarinet lately? Nice. Yeah, I did. That's pretty cool. No, I used to play a trumpet. Yeah. I haven't played in a while though. I've been too busy. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that's true. Makes it hard to play. Yeah. Yeah, that is cool. Yeah, that's cool. All right, it's 2 o'clock, so let's get started. We're missing like 30% of the class probably. Is something going on today? I guess that makes sense. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Let's get started. So we're talking about chapter 6 today, strategic management. There's a lot of what we did Thursday that we're gonna talk about again today. A lot of the same concepts reappear. All right. First step, my favorite selfie from last week, this is the Caniacs. Group 9. This is a pretty cool selfie with extra sauce because 2 sauces is not enough for a Caniac combo. You need at least 4 sauces for a Caniac. All right. Cool things I want to make you all aware of that I have linked the PowerPoint. These are very beneficial for y'all. These are the career fairs. So it looks like it's in the same spot, just different days for different majors. Just by show of hands, real quick, who's accounting in here? All right, any finance or IT? All right, very cool. Management? Nice, that's my major, go management. Marketing or sales? Sweet, it's pretty even divide. What I want to do is if you are in finance and you go to the career fair, I'll excuse you from class, but you have to take a selfie at the career fair. So I know that you actually went. But if you want to go to that. And if you want to go to that, I'll post a recording of Thursday's lecture so you can see that as well. You should definitely take advantage of these because the best way to get a job is to network. Your GPA will be way less important than the amount of networking you do when you want to find a job. You ever heard the phrase, it's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake? Say, it's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. That's actually very true. You have to put yourself out there and make connections if you want to find a good job. Don't just rely on your GPA, although it also should be good. You should have both. All right, so those are all linked. If you click those, it'll take you to the event details. There's also one that's not posted at UIC. This is a more broad career fair. It's geared towards Hispanic serving institutions, but it's not restricted to, what's up? It's for any race. You just have to be a student at an HIS, which UIC is Hispanic serving. So everyone's invited to this. You can also use this link to sign up. If you enter for this, you have a chance to win a scholarship. So even if you, well, you should do it anyways, but you can also maybe get a scholarship. This one has, I want to say over 200 employers that's going to be there. And there are some opportunities for one-on-ones, it sounds like, so take advantage of that. All right, let's get into the course material. I actually wanted to include this week the Manage You. Each chapter starts with this. If you read the book, you would have noticed that. It's like a little spiel about things you can do in your own life to implement what we're going to learn in this chapter. Usually I leave that out. I leave that to you to read in your own time, but I think this one's pretty cool, especially given that we just saw some opportunities for career fairs. This one's about managing your brand as you prepare to start searching for a job or going on the market is another way of saying that. The take-home message for this one is having a personal brand. This aligns with the chapter material because we're thinking about organizational brands. Like, how does an organization differentiate themselves from others to get a competitive advantage? This is about how do you separate yourself and have a unique identity to give yourself a leg up on the job market. If you can make yourself stand out in one way or another, you're going to have a much higher odds of finding a job. A few things we can do. First, identify our core message. A lot of times on our resumes or CVs, we write a personal statement. Sometimes you put that on your LinkedIn profile. That's like in 100 words or less, what's special about you that should make people want to hire you. So it could be that you're conscientious and hardworking and open to work. If you want to put that hashtag in there, that's always great too. All right, so find something that that represents your core message. Write a personal branding statement. Develop a social media strategy. Is anyone not on LinkedIn? If you're not on LinkedIn, that's a great opportunity, especially in business. If you're going to go into business, you should have that. Take advantage of that. That's a great way to network. And that leads into the last bullet point there. Once you start to do that, for instance, you build a LinkedIn profile, make it look good, put your personal statement on there. Then when you go to career fairs, you can meet people, share your LinkedIn profile, start to connect that way. And that's kind of an inroad to getting, to helping yourself network to find a better job. All right, any questions about this? Any questions in general about preparing for going in the market? Okay, some people have in the past asked about, like, what do I do to prepare for an interview? Or like, how do I dress? Arlette, you have a question? Cool. I don't even know what that is. Can you explain what a handshake is? Nice. Okay, well, cool. Get a handshake. Thanks. All right, I was gonna say if y'all have questions about going on the market or doing interviews or preparing for that sort of stuff that's not related to handshake, you can let me know. I like to help out with that sort of thing. All right, let's jump into chapter finally. Here are our learning objectives, identifying the principles that underlie strategic positioning, strategic management as a process. What does that look like? Explain how organizations assess the competitive landscape to develop their competitive strategy. We'll talk about methods and techniques for having a good strategy. There's a couple that are really cool, really easy to understand takeaways that help us brand our organization. And then last, we'll talk about enhancing our strategic thinking. Start off with strategic positioning and levels of strategy. That should be strategy. It's a first step. What is strategic positioning? Basically, it's how we position our organization to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. If you remember, in 2 different classes now, we define competitive advantage as being more effective or efficient than our competitors and producing a good or service. And if it's sustainable, then that's how we stay in business long term. We want to have something that is a key to success that we can hold over our competitors for as long as possible. One of the big takeaways for this chapter is some really concrete ways to make sure you're staying ahead of your competitors. So there's some cool stuff in here. At a broad level, the book suggests that there are sort of 3 strategies we can take based on how many customers we want to serve and how many needs do we want to meet or fulfill. So the first tier, few needs, many customers. Crocs is an example of that. We're going to produce like just a couple of goods or service, and we're going to market it to the masses. We could take a broad needs for a few customers. Buy Baby, which I've never been to before. I'm assuming that's a baby store. That is, we have everything baby related, but it's only geared towards a smaller market. That is people with babies. And then last, broad needs, many customers. So like Allegiant, they have a lot of services and they're marketing to the masses here. The only thing you don't see is few needs, few customers. Why is that? Why would I want to do few needs, few customers? Or why would that be bad? Artem, you have a thought? Cyrus? Yeah, you're right. People have a lot. Yes. So we want to serve lots of needs and lots of people. If we're only meeting few needs for a few people, that means we have a very small customer base or consumer base who are going to want our products. So we usually either want to expand and have broad needs or meet broad needs or have many customers or both if possible. We'll talk about reasons you might want to have a smaller scope of customers or a smaller share of the market if you want to prioritize other things instead. So we'll talk about that later in the chapter as well. All right, let's keep going here. Let's take a look at 3 levels of strategy. I don't want to focus too much on this, and there will be no key terms from this slide, nothing you need to know for the exam. But the one thing I want to point out is that it looks a lot like our goals, how we have goals that go down the different levels of the organization. And the key thing is that they cascade. That's a term we should remember. If we're going to have a good strategy that's outlined by the CEO, so up here at our corporate level strategy, they're going to say, here's our direction long term, here's the strategy, and then that should trickle down or cascade throughout the organization. And everything we do at the bottom of the organization should make sure that it advances or is in sync with the strategy of upper management. All right. There's a question raised by the publishers here. Does strategic management work well for small as well as large firms? So they show, or at least research shows, that even small businesses can benefit from using strategic management, like thinking long-term, developing plans for differentiating themselves as an organization. However, very few small businesses engage in this strategic management. So the question is, why do you think they neglect it? Why do the small businesses not engage in strategic management? What's going on? Kadisha, you have a thought? Yeah, you got two good points there. So maybe they don't understand it. Maybe that's true. Maybe they don't have the resources or the personnel on staff who understand it. But the second thing you said is usually more true, that they get overwhelmed. So as a small business, usually management has more functions. Think about like the owner of, I don't know, a bagel store around the corner. They have to make the bagels, open the shop, manage the employees, serve the customers. So they're doing a lot more day-to-day tasks that can distract them from being strategic. And that's the biggest thing, is that these businesses get so caught up in the day-to-day that they don't think long-term. Do you remember I mentioned a book, The 4 Disciplines of Excellence and the Wildly Important Goals, the WIGs? It's a very similar thought process. As if you neglect your wildly important goals, such as strategic management, it's just never going to get done. All right. There we go. Thank you, Khadijah. Spot on. Okay, we saw this graphic on Thursday. What's different about it is that it's blue this time instead of yellow. Everything else is the same. So this time we're going to focus our attention on sort of blocks 2 and 3 here. So how do we assess the current reality? Like, where do we stand relative to our competitors? And that'll tell us, what's it, Mike? That'll tell us how we go about achieving our competitive advantage, given what we know about ourselves and our competitors. So let's jump into that. All right. So a few ways we can assess the current reality. We know about SWOT analysis, but we're going to go over it again because it's in this chapter of the book. We'll talk about the VRIO. VRIO is a really popular one for determining our competitive advantage. Then forecasting and benchmarking, which you're probably most familiar with those two. So SWOT analysis up first. This is, of course, the bulk of our group project is our SWOT analysis. It's a way for us to analyze the company to see whether or not they have a competitive advantage. What is their competitive advantage? How can they maximize their competitive advantage? All these things we can learn more about through SWOT analysis. I want to show y'all real quick an example that I think will help. If you're doing, for example, the opportunity section for your group project, you might want to look at this and see what are some good opportunities just for this example. So this one is a SWOT analysis for college. Let me preface this by saying this is not what you should put in your paper or your presentation. You shouldn't just put like one graphic with all your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It should be like a page or 2 on strengths. And then for your presentation, a slide, maybe 2 on strengths. All right, but this example for this college, some of the strengths were they have loyal alumni. So maybe their alumni donate a lot of money. That's a huge strength because that gives them extra financial capital. A weakness might be they have insufficient racial diversity. So what could that limit? What could be a downside of insufficient racial diversity for a college? Why would it be bad? Connor? Less activity? Oh yeah, like less attractive. If you're someone from a diverse background, you might not want to go to the all-white college. Yeah, Cyrus? Yeah, it could lead to legal issues. We'll talk about later in the book the legal implications of not being diverse enough. So some things I thought about, if we don't have enough racial diversity, there might be limited funding opportunities from the government. The government will sometimes fund universities to increase diversity. But also, this is relevant to organizations as well. Limited racial diversity or diversity of any kind leads to lack of innovation. If we have too much of the same personality or background, it makes us more likely to engage in groupthink and be less dynamic. All right, that was a little bit of a tangent, but that's a weakness. Some opportunities. Perhaps this college is in a, let's see, there's growth in many local skilled jobs. So let's say we're in Chicago and there's a huge increase in the number of programmers being hired, like computer programmers. That would be an opportunity for UIC to invest and bring in more students for computer programming so that they can have higher placement in those jobs. Keep in mind, again, the big difference between these opportunities relative to strengths is that opportunities are external factors, things the organization can take advantage of. An example is a threat, depressed state and national economy. So if you're in business during the pandemic and people aren't buying things and you can't open your business, that's a huge threat to your competitive advantage. All right. Let's move on from SWOT. Let's talk about VRIO. This one I think is really cool because it's super simple to understand. There are these 4 descriptors that tell us, is our advantage competitive and is it sustainable? So these stand for value, rarity, inimitability, which is, can anyone define inimitability or imitability? Those are antonyms. Sydney? Yes, you're exactly right. If it's imitable, someone can copy it. How this is usually presented, VRIO is inimitable. That means they cannot copy what we do. You want your competitive advantage to be inimitable, not copyable. The last one here is organization. So let's talk about these real quick. Is your product valuable? Let's use Apple as an example. I think that's a good example of something that is valuable, rare, inimitable, and has good organization. So if we think an iPhone is valuable and that it's a quality phone, then yes, we have a valuable product. Is it rare? The iPhone is one of a kind. So there are different models of iPhones, but there's only one iPhone cell phone. So yes, it is rare. Okay. Is it inimitable? If people can't emulate the iPhone or its ecosystem, so we think about like iTunes and iMessaging and iCloud, all those things, that is something that other competitors have a really hard time imitating. That would mean our product is inimitable. And then last, so this last question is relative to the organization. The first 3 ask about what is our good or service? Is it valuable, rare, inimitable? The last one, O, is how well do we take advantage of that? Because we could have a great product, but have very poor, we could have very poor use of that product. Okay, so if the organization is set up so that the product can shine and be taken advantage of, then yes, we have a good organization, and that leads to a sustained competitive advantage. Basically, we have to say yes to all 4 of these questions. All right, any questions here? Let's keep going here. So let's look at forecasting next. We're trying to predict the future as an organization. There are kind of 2 things we should think about. The first is trend analysis. That's really what forecasting is trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. The best thing we can do is use good data from what we've done in the recent past and try to extend that like 3 to 5 years in the future and see what do we expect to happen around the corner. For example, if our sales are tanking in the last year, maybe we're down 50%, then that would tell us unless we do something drastic here, we're going to continue to decline and maybe go out of business. Okay, so we'll try to predict what's going to happen in the near future. And then second here is engage in contingency planning. And this might be as a result of your trend analysis. You say, okay, based on what we think is going to happen, there's a 70% chance this will happen and a 30% chance this will happen. We need a plan for each of these 2 possible outcomes. And if we have a plan for both, then we're more likely to be successful if the less likely outcome occurs. If we don't have a contingency plan, we'll be caught off guard, and that's when we are much less likely to succeed as a business. All right. A quick question here. When you think most CEOs are forecasting for the future, what do you think they're basing most of their decisions on? Just take a general guess. How do CEOs tend to plan for the future? What might they account for in their trend analysis? Cyrus? Yeah, so they might look at financial records. That would be smart. Artem? Okay, yeah, you're definitely right. They want to maximize profit, minimize risk. That's a great strategy. My question is, what are they looking at to plan their course? Arlette? Sorry? Oh, that's a really good answer. Feedback. What kind of feedback? Can you give a specific example? Nice. Yeah, they're listening to customers. That'd be another smart one. So those are all great. If you look at financial records, that's hard data that tells us how we're doing. Feedback from customers tells us if we're being responsive to the customer. What a lot of CEOs do, well, I should say a lot of bad CEOs, what they do is they use their gut and intuition and they say like, well, I think recently we've been doing pretty good. Maybe we could do better at this. Without looking at the hard data, they just create a plan based on their intuition. So if you want to be a good manager or a good leader, don't just go with your gut. Look at the hard data. All right, let's keep going here. Let's look at benchmarking. This is probably the one everyone is most familiar with. So if we were benchmarking, we're comparing our performance relative to our competitors. And this is an example of airlines. So top airlines and how they rank for certain things. If you look at overall ranking, Delta's the best. American's the worst. That's kind of surprising. And Spirit is one of the best. That's very surprising. Okay. If I'm the CEO of American Airlines, I look at this and I say like, all right, we're in pretty big trouble here, guys. We're last place in terms of overall ranking. What are some things we need to do? The overall ranking is not super valuable. What I want to look at are these metrics here that are more concrete. They can help us identify what is it that's compromising our overall ranking. Maybe it's our on-time arrival, but we're actually doing pretty decent there. Americans, middle of the pack. Lost baggage complaints, we have very few of those. Number of overall complaints, we're not doing too bad. So if I thought overall we're really sucking it up here, and none of these metrics tell me why, then I would do more research. Okay, try to figure out what is it that's making us do so poorly. One thing we should be careful about, we talked about this last week, is that we shouldn't just look at our competitors and say, like, they're beating us on this, so we should emulate that. Let's imagine that the competitors are beating us on the cost of in-flight services. So for some reason, American, we're spending $20 per passenger and Spirit's paying $3 per passenger. Maybe that's because Spirit is giving everyone crackers and water and we're giving them booze that they want. Okay, so be wary when you're looking at benchmarking because it doesn't tell the whole story. Sometimes you have to think about what might it be about this that customers like or dislike. All right. Let's look at some examples of corporate level strategy. Okay, the three approaches we can take when we're forming strategy in terms of our aggressiveness and our acceptance of risk. There's growth, stability, and defensive. The first, if we're in a really good position, we can be aggressive and take a growth strategy. So we're either expanding in terms of sales revenue, market share, number of employees. Maybe we're expanding the services that we're offering. Y'all remember, y'all might not have been old enough for this, but McDonald's diners, did y'all ever see those? That was a pretty cool thing in like around 2005, maybe, where McDonald's said, all right, we're going to do a sit-down restaurant now. And it was a thing for like 2 or 3 years. McDonald's tried to expand their services to be more high-end, I guess. Didn't work out so great for them long-term, but it was a cool and interesting way to try a growth approach. Typically it involves some form of innovation. So in that example, McDonald's says we're going to do something new and let's have some table service. And we'll talk a lot about innovation in chapter 10. Stability is where we're going to pretty much not try to grow and also not try to shrink. We're just going to shore up and keep doing what we're doing. Have y'all heard the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Yeah, that's very common. It's also very good advice for a lot of things. I think the book is an example of Tabasco sauce, which has been pretty much the same. They've been doing the same thing as a business since the 1860s, and they're doing pretty well. Okay. The last strategy here is our defensive strategy. So if we want to go on the defense, we might reduce costs, we might sell off assets, we might do layoffs. Basically, at this point, we're trying to protect our assets and either minimize risk or cut our losses. Why do y'all think an organization would go on the defense? How could that be beneficial? Connor? You said take a step back. What was the second thing you said? Maybe like take back, you said like kind of evaluate the market and then come back in. Yeah. Sometimes we need to do that if maybe we're starting to realize our sales are hurting or we're losing our advantage and we don't know why. Maybe we'll take a step back and say like, all right, let's try to figure out this situation before we go back into this head on. All right. Any other thoughts, Artem? Yeah. Sometimes it's a last resort. It's like, all right, we're really hurting here. We can't keep going, so we need to start laying people off. We need to close down some parts of our business and focus on like just the core here so we don't go bankrupt. Cool. Sometimes it's a necessary evil. Which is going to be the next question. We kind of got at this already, mostly with Connor's answer here, that sometimes it allows us to take a step back, reevaluate, and then reapproach the situation. Cool. All right, let's look at the BCG matrix. This is from Boston Consulting Group. So this is a pretty useful matrix. It tells us what should we invest our resources in. And what it does is breaks our resources into these 4 categories: the stars, cash cows, question marks, and dogs. And it says all of our goods or services fall into this chart somewhere. So imagine I'm Apple. I'm not an Apple fan particularly, but I think they're a good example a lot of times. If I'm Apple, where do y'all think the iPhone falls into this chart? Is that a star, cash cow, question mark, or dog? Star? Yeah, I would say star too. That's like their flagship product is the iPhone. That's the thing they should keep, that the one good or service they can rely on to help maximize their profits. Okay. Does that mean that's the thing we should invest the most resources in long term? No. The star is pretty stable and successful. Okay. What we might want to do instead is invest in some things that have more opportunity for growth. And what we don't want to invest in are things that have low opportunity for growth and also a chance for a low market share. So if you think about Apple's VR headset, okay, that might be something that is a question mark. It could have it's definitely something that is catching on in terms of, well, VR headsets are popular, but we don't quite know. Is this thing going to be a hot product for us? Is ours going to be a successful VR headset? We don't know. So it might represent a more risky venture for us as an organization. One of the big takeaways from this is that we never want to invest in dogs. Why do y'all think organizations invest in dogs? Products that just suck, they have low market share, they have low growth. Why would we keep investing in that? Rabisha? Yeah, we're going to be taking a gamble on it. A lot of the people that do that, they won't give it up. Like, I can bring this back. It's not dead yet. A lot of times it's because they just can't admit that they were wrong about a certain product. Maybe it was their pet project and it's failed, but they don't want to admit they were wrong. So they just keep investing money in it. That is led to the downfall of a lot of good CEOs and organizations more broadly, is that they can't admit something's a dog and give up on it. All right, let's keep going here. Talk about diversification strategy. There's a couple reasons we would diversify our organization. And by diversify, we mean diversify in terms of goods and services. The first is to either grow revenue, and the second is to reduce risk. And the ways we do that are different. If we want to diversify in a related industry, that won't help us grow. And if we diversify in an unrelated industry, that'll help us reduce risk. Yeah, ideally we can do both. We can grow within our industry, but also diversify into an unrelated industry to help us protect our risks. Ooh, sorry here. Sorry, y'all. My question for y'all is, why do you think by diversifying an unrelated industry? So for example, let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm Google and I do a lot of tech, and now I want to start going into automotive. So I produce Google cars. How would that be helpful for lowering my risk? So why would it be good? Rubisha? Yeah, maybe that wasn't the best example because they're kind of related because they're both technology. Well, let's imagine it's in a totally different industry. One way we can think about it is the same way I approach investing in the stock market. We like to diversify the things that we invest in. Organizations will do the same thing. So rather than saying we're going to stake all of our future in one industry, we might diversify into multiple industries just in case one of them tanks. We're still afloat in these other businesses. Okay. There will almost definitely be a midterm question that says something to the effect of true or false. Diversifying in unrelated industries will increase your risk. And that sounds like it might be true because you're going into some industry that you're not an expert in, but the reality is that's false because that will lower your risk. All right. Next up here. So we have diversification through vertical integration. This is not a term that I think is super popular, but it's an interesting concept for us to think about. It essentially means that as an organization, I can expand either, vertically. So I might buy a producer that I'm buying from. I might actually take over that organization, make them a subsidiary of my organization. I might also buy up somebody that's below me in the production chain. So maybe a distributor. I buy them out and make them part of my organization. Okay. One example of vertical integration is Google. So they started as a search engine, and now they sell phones that you use that search engine on. I think Starbucks was another example used by the book. So Starbucks buys the coffee, they roast it, then they sell it. All right. Let's take a look at ways we can establish our business level strategy. Okay, so we're thinking about, as our objective here, how do we want to compete in our industry? There's a few things we can look at. So this guy, Porter, he suggested there are 5 competitive forces. And in response to those 5 competitive forces, we can develop one of 4 competitive strategies. And then Jack Welch is a pretty famous CEO that has his own approach. Essentially, both of these are going to look at how do we gather information and then make a plan based on that information to maximize our competitive advantage. Here are the 5 competitive forces. So this guy Porter said that these 5 things prompt us to engage in strategic management. So threats of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of buyers, threats to substitute products, and then rivalry among competitors. Can y'all think of how, let's look at number 3 here, the bargaining power of buyers. What does that look like in terms of consumers? How do consumers drive products? Or how do they have bargaining power? Yeah, Sydney? Yeah. So consumers can say, we're just not going to pay this price. Or maybe we're going to find it cheaper from your competitor. So in that way, consumers can drive down the price of a product. Cool. Thanks. Another question I have for y'all. What happens if we remove these forces? Let's say we're in an ecosystem that has no threat of new entrants. Suppliers and buyers have no bargaining power. There's no threat of substitute products. What does that look like? What if I got rid of all of these threats? How would the organization respond? Yeah, you said monopoly? Yeah, that's exactly it. So if I have a monopoly, that means I have no threat of competitors. Therefore, the consumers have no bargaining power over me. I can set the price and they can't do anything about it because who are they going to go to? I can give y'all one example. The condo I live in, LRS does our trash services. They pick up our dumpsters and they do a terrible job. But all we can do is complain if they do a bad job because there's no one else we can go to. So if you're an organization, that's the kind of situation you want to be in, is a place where there's no threat to you. However, it's very, very rare that you have a monopoly. In fact, that's one of the goals of the government, is to make sure there are no monopolies to protect consumers. All right, let's keep going here. So Porter says we have these 5 threats. As a response to those, we have to formulate our own strategy. And here are the 4 strategies. I actually don't like the way that they label these in the book, so I'm going to focus on 2 things here. The first is whether we want to, as an organization, prioritize costs or differentiation. And then the second thing is, do I want to focus on having a broad or a narrow focus? So the first thing here, if you look at these first 2, if I want to take a cost leadership strategy, that means that I want to keep costs and prices low for a wide market. So I want to be the cost leader. That means I have the cheapest product. The opposite of that is if I want to have a differentiation strategy, I'm offering a unique and superior value for a wide market. So I'm not going to have the cheapest product, but I will have a more quality product. Basically, we're hoping that our consumers will either go for something that's cheap if I'm a cost leader, or they'll pay extra money for the better product if I want to be a differentiation-focused company. So that's the first thing. The second thing, if you look at these 2 down here, they're actually very similarly named. This is still cost-focused, but the second thing here is focus, which indicates a more narrow market. So I want to keep my costs low, but instead of focusing at a broad consumer base, I'm going to be very narrow or focused in my approach. And the same is true for this differentiation focused strategy. So again, I have a differentiated product that's better, but I'm more on a more focused or more narrow consumer base. What I would prefer y'all focus on, if you're answering a test question related to this, is this graphic here. This graphic actually was not in the book, but I think it's a good way to look at these 2 approaches, or rather these 4 approaches. So am I focused on low cost or differentiation for my competitive advantage? And then is my scope more niche or narrow, or more broad or total market? The other thing I like about this graphic is there's this thing in the middle, stuck in the middle. What do y'all think that means? What could that mean for a business if they're stuck in the middle? That'd be a good thing or a bad thing? Think a good thing? So you're doing a little of both. They have a cheaper product, but also a more quality product. Eric, what's up? Okay. Yeah, I think y'all are assuming they do it well. And I would agree with you. If they're good at having a low cost and a quality product, that's great. But what this graphic wants to demonstrate is that it's very hard to do successfully. And 99% of the time when organizations try to meet in the middle, they compromise on cost and quality. And that means they lose out to people who want a cheaper product and people that want a better product. People tend to either want a cheaper product or a better product. And if you're somewhere in the middle, then you're going to get beat on both sides. So almost always you have to pick. Do you want to focus more on cost or more on quality? It's very, very difficult to do both. All right. Talk about this guy, Jack Welch. He's a pretty famous CEO of GE. He actually died, I think, 3 years ago. Probably the most popular CEO in American history. He was very cutthroat. He was also big in like the 80s and 90s, where it was way more, well, organizations in general were way more cutthroat back then. He would post, he called it the batting average. He was a big baseball fan. What he would do is post in the office the ranking of all employees. He'd say, all right, out of the 100 of y'all, here's the order, and the top 10% get a raise, and the bottom 10% get fired every year. They would fire the bottom 10% of their employees. So it's very tough to be successful in that environment. However, it also drove GE to like crazy success. All right, so what was his philosophy? He said, ask yourself these 5 questions. First off, what does the playing field look like now? Second, what has the competition been up to? And third, what have you been up to? And these first 3 questions, I'll get at getting a lay of the land. If you remember our 5-step process for strategic management, that's like step 2, I think. Assess the current reality before you start to make your plan. And that's what Jack Welch was saying we do. Look at our competitors, look at yourself, and then based on those questions, think about what's around the corner, do some forecasting or trend analysis, and then finally, what's your winning move? So based on all this information, what is the course of action that gives you the highest chance of success long term? All right, seems very simple. Like, duh, you think you would do that. But a lot of CEOs neglect to do that. We've answered this question, but we're going to move on. Okay. I think this is our last topic here. I can tell this is not y'all's favorite chapter. But last thing in this chapter is strategic implementation. So assuming that we've got a good lay of the land, we've come up with a good plan, the last step here is implement it and then make sure it stays on track. Okay, so a couple general things here. Our strategy should flow down the organization, aka cascade. We talked about that in like the second or third slide. If the CEO says, here's our strategy, we need to make sure that everyone's bought in, and then also everything we're doing throughout the organization supports that strategy. This is what it might look like in an organization. Let's say corporate says we're going to increase profits by 5%. Then throughout the organization, we're thinking about, all right, within the in-store division business, how do we do that? And even within that, how does operations within in-store division help us increase corporate profits? Okay, so there's nothing different between this and then and goal cascading. Another thing to keep in mind is that we need to focus on these 3 core processes. So in the execution, we have to make sure that we're focused on people, strategy, and operations. One thing that I like about this is that it emphasizes that people are the first and most important process here. As an organization, people are our most important resource. Okay, so we need to make sure that the people we have on our team are the ones that are going to help us succeed in the future. Cool. All right. Talk about roadblocks here. Let's say we come up with a good plan. We're trying to implement our plan and we reach roadblocks. This will happen every time you try to implement a plan. You'll face some sort of resistance. There are many different reasons why you meet resistance. The key thing is that you have to understand what kind of resistance you're facing and then the best way to solve it. So as an example, sometimes the C-suite will be more or less excited about your innovation. Okay. Sometimes you'll have, let's say, half the board on board. They're excited about your plan, and the other half are not. One thing we can do in this situation is try to foster a culture that values getting things done. If I'm the CEO, well, let me ask y'all, how can I foster a culture that values getting things done? What are some things a CEO can do? How can I motivate my employees and my organization more broadly to want to get things done? Yeah. Tell me your name. Krish, all right, what you got? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Setting example is always the best way to foster any culture, whether that's like open-mindedness or getting things done. Be the person who shows other how to do that. Some other things we can do are make it clear that incentives will be provided for those who get things done. So maybe bonuses are tied to getting things done or compensation more broadly. Right. Another roadblock we can have is sometimes there's resistance on the hierarchy. If I am communicating my vision as a CEO and for some reason that's not reaching the frontline employees, a lot of times it's just because they haven't bought into your plan yet. This will almost definitely be on the midterm. What is a way you can make sure your plans are bought into and executed? And the best thing you can do is sell your plans. Have y'all ever seen a statement from a boss or maybe even UIC where they said, we're going to do this. You got to do it. And you've had resistance to that, or you've seen resistance to that. A lot of times when we see resistance to those kind of communications, it's because they weren't very convincing, or they didn't sell the importance of doing this, whatever this change is. All right. Last thing here. When you are maintaining strategic control, one of the best things you can do is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Have y'all heard that phrase before? That's very important. For all things in life, the more simple you can make your message or your plan, the more likely it is people will be engaged in that and want to help you carry that out. Okay, stay focused and keep moving. Very good. All right, let's look at our career readiness model. A couple core skills from this chapter. The most important here is our critical thinking and problem solving skills. Also, our task-based knowledge, our understanding of the business, and our decision-making skills. Let's look at ways we can increase those. All right. Prepare yourself for your career. Things we can do first is understand the business. So understand a potential or current employer's business and strategy, and extend your knowledge by networking, seeking mentoring, participating in job rotation, and attending cross-functional or business meetings. So all these things you can do to help yourself understand how does the business operate will give you an insider's advantage. Then second, broaden your task and functional knowledge. Make connections between concepts, ideas, people, and events. All right. Any questions on that? Good. Let's do our self-assessment then. Let's take 3 minutes. We'll do self-assessment number for chapter 6, and then we'll discuss. Anybody need more time for this? All right, let's discuss then. We'll get out of here after that. So let's talk about our, what do they call these skills? Strategic management skills. Was anybody lower than they thought they would be or lower than they wanted to be? Raise your hand if you were high. Okay, raise your hand if you were moderate. Okay, anybody low? All right, let's say you're moderate, you want to improve to high. Can we think of any of these skills listed up here and think about ways we could improve on these? Yeah, Khadijah? Okay, what is that? Will that help for any one of these skills particular up here? Okay, cool. And I agree. I don't know if y'all heard, but she said just put yourself out there, force yourself to be in situations that'll help you develop those skills. It's very difficult for us to put ourselves in those situations because we don't like to fail. But that's where we're going to learn a lot. Okay, any other thoughts? All right, I would encourage you to work on those skills. We're going to jump ahead to the attendance slide. All right, that'll be it for chapter 6. All right, thanks y'all. I'll see you on Thursday. Yes, Sydney? Yep. Yeah, that works. Thanks. Good luck. Yep.